Boruto 2 Blue Vortex Chapter 35 has just been released, and the start of the arc, the Hidari arc, is looking quite peak, as what happens in this chapter is something that nobody really had predicted. I didn't think this would be happening in this way. I did think that something would happen to Kashin Koji, but I didn't think it would happen in the way it happens in this chapter. Ikimoto and Kijimoto have cooked up an amazing chapter right here, so without further ado, let's just start the review. So concerning the cover, this is what we get. Hidari is the cover, and personally, this is my favorite Senju cover. I would rate this cover a 9 out of 10. I really like Hidari, the way he looks, the pose that he is hitting, and I really like the background. Purple and yellow really does seem to go well together. The title of this chapter is cute, and the side text is "Sharpen your fangs to find your true answer." This is what we get concerning the cover. So when it comes to the beginning of the chapter, we end up seeing Hidari and Jura's interpretation of Mamushi's death. The preview is Hidari, the monster that was born alongside Jura, the seeker of love. How do the two of them interpret Mamushi's death? And in this conversation, we do end up seeing something quite interesting from Jura. He ends up letting us know about the instincts of Mamushi and how it reflected an aspect of love. We see the more romantic side of love being showcased with Matsuri, and when it comes to Ryu, we see the parent and child aspect of love that is showcased. And when it comes to Mamushi, we see one that is totally different, an aspect of love that has to deal with lust. And this is what Jura ends up telling us about Mamushi. And he lets us know about Mamushi's will, which is to have the Senju prosper. This is something that resonated with Jura, but on further inspection, he views this way of thinking to be quite animalistic. Like animals simply think about their species evolving and reproducing because their instincts tell them to do so. Somebody like Jura who wants to surpass his instincts, he believes that this way of thinking is too simple and stems from that creature being an imperfect life form. So he's basically calling Mamushi imperfect, and he wants to go through a different route, and I find this to be quite intriguing. And then we end up going to Hidari. Jura asks Hidari what he thinks, and Hidari doesn't really care, but one thing he cares about is why Hidari, compared to all the other Senju, why did Jura care to save him? Because when it came to Mamushi, obviously there really wasn't much of an opening for them to be able to come and help Mamushi. But when it came to Matsuri and Ryu, it was completely different. There was definitely a way to get them back. But Jura, who went to the battlefield, when he was there, he didn't even pay attention to their torn soul bulbs. He didn't really care. And the same for Hidari, who could have simply made his way there and saved them. Hidari asks the question, why? What is different about Hidari compared to the rest? And the answer that he gives is quite intriguing. He says that he tried to come up with a hypothetical of where Hidari is gone, and when he does that, he begins to feel lonely. He even goes as far as to say that he doesn't want Hidari to disappear on him. And this is pretty intriguing considering the fact that the next arc is going to be dealing with Hidari and him potentially being slimed out so that Sasuke can come back to life. What exactly would be Jura's reaction when they potentially succeed in getting Hidari's Torn Soul Bulb to revive Sasuke? Is this the first time where we're going to be seeing a different sort of awakening concerning Jura? There is definitely something here that is being foreshadowed. Hidari says that him saying that gives him the major ick, but strangely enough, he doesn't hate it. And Jura makes this weird awkward face, but I really love this panel, so I'll give Jura a pass. But now we end up looking at Ada, and Ada was the one who was paying attention to this conversation in real time. Since Mamushi is no longer there, nobody is going to be able to stop her and look back at her in a way that makes Ada feel threatened. We have Sarada, who ends up leaving an eye store where she ends up getting her new prescription. In doing so, she is then ready as she is clearly able to see now as her prescription has been updated. After doing so, she ends up noticing a kunai, and when she looks up, she sees that it is Boruto, and Boruto points to the location where he wants both of them to end up going to. We then go to Inogen and Kashin Koji, who are having a discussion, and Kashin Koji is essentially telling Inogen that he should be ready at all times for any point where he is going to be needed to link through a conversation. Inogen is going to be the secret transmission in which Kashin Koji is able to talk to people in the line that isn't recorded, so Inogen has to be ready no matter what. No matter if he's taking a bath or even if he is sleeping, his job is to be ready whenever Kashin Koji may send a toad his way. This is where we then end up going to the lab, and we see Kawaki. Kawaki slowly makes his way into Amado's lab, and it kind of seems a little bit bigger than it did before. I don't know if in the time skip we do end up seeing that it grew, because when I compare it to what I saw before, it seems a little bit bigger and more spacious than before. Amado, who ends up telling Kawaki about the new toes that he ended up making that are similar to the ones that Kashin Koji ends up using and can be shrinked just like the other ones, as they are not living things, but it is all his own personal design. Kawaki wants him to hurry up and let him know why he's really being called. And this is where we get to have a better understanding of just what happened to Kawaki's specs. We have Amado, who tells Kawaki that he's able to control his battle abilities, where we see 85% in attack and 50% on defense. These were the stats given to Kawaki for this upcoming battle. Kawaki is angry at the fact that it isn't at 100%, but Amado quickly reminds him that this is the only reason why he ended up living. If the specs were any different, Kawaki would have died in this battle, as those defensive stats staying there is what allowed Kawaki to be so successful. Then we have Amado, who's like, yo, I'm not really trying to argue with you right now. What I really have is another way to make you powerful. He then ends up placing a smaller toad on Kawaki. With that small toad going on Kawaki's neck, Amado is able to change Kawaki's stats at his will. We don't see him click anything on the computer. It simply feels like he almost just thought of something, and that thought was manifested through the toad, and the toad ended up changing Kawaki's stats, as we see that his attack is at 100%. Amado confirms this by telling us that he can instantly update his settings in real time, thanks to the toad that is attacked to his neck. And then we have something pretty interesting that Amado tells us that he's going to be able to do. This is what he says. For example, I can make it so that your defense is usually at 100, which means that if you end up getting attacked, then you won't die. When Kawaki is at 100% defense, there is nothing that you can do to kill him. You can't one-tap him even if he's off guard. And then when he switches onto the attack, where Kawaki is then willing to attack, he will then switch Kawaki's defensive stats to his attacking stats, so he will be at 100. This is what the new ability that he has been working on is going to be able to allow Kawaki to do in these upcoming battles, and Amado is going to be the one who is controlling everything. This is what he describes to Kawaki, and he compares it to chakra control, where Kawaki, who doesn't believe in chakra control, he is going to be taking this more scientific route, which ultimately ends up leading towards Amado having a bit of leverage when it comes to Kawaki's bodies and his stats. However, it allows him to bypass the training of an authentic shinobi. What is also pretty interesting to discuss is the fact that the toad is on Kawaki's neck. And what do we end up seeing later on when it comes to Kawaki? Kawaki later on ends up wearing a scarf. This may be potential foreshadowing for the fact of why Kawaki has this new design change, as the toad would end up being visible. So to hide that, Kawaki ends up getting a scarf, maybe from Sumire or from somebody else, that allows it to be hidden. Or maybe the scarf is some technology that protects the toad from being destroyed if an attack is landed. These are possibilities, but a design change that makes the toad less visible, and thus his potential weakness when it comes to controlling his abilities is hidden. I believe that it is a valuable method. But what this also tells us is why Boruto tells Kawaki that he would be stronger if he trained with Naruto, because Naruto would have taught him this chakra control, and with this chakra control he wouldn't have to depend on anybody else but himself when it comes to controlling his power. And I find that to be very interesting as a theme, because it basically tells us that through training one is able to better understand himself and control himself. But by relying on technology in a way, on skipping out on training, you are giving up control over yourself. You are losing autonomy. And that is basically what we're seeing being expressed with Kawaki here, where by skipping the training, by skipping the work required that would allow you to gain mastery over yourself, you are then putting at risk your own autonomy. And that is what is being showcased here. But there's one thing that Amado needs Kawaki to do, but it doesn't have anything to do with Amado's daughter. Kawaki already told him that no matter what, nothing will change. It has to do with somebody else. But before we come to learn about this, we go to the conversation between Sarada and Boruto, and this takes place in the Senju Park. We have seen this previously in the anime, and I'll show a couple pages here, but this is the exact location where this is, the big tree. Sarada and Boruto end up having a pretty interesting conversation, and in this conversation, Sarada apologizes for the fact that she ended up being one of the reasons why Boruto ends up having this scar, when she ends up mentioning the fact that her eyes are a little bit better. But Boruto's like, yo, you actually ended up giving me a bit of aura. This scar of his made him look a little bit more handsome, made him look a little bit more tough. And Sarada says that Boruto is an idiot. But Boruto then explains to Sarada exactly why they're having this conversation, and this is due to the fact that Code is targeting her. And this is one of the reasons why Boruto brought her to this location, because Claude, during the fight with Momushi, has been pulling out random claw marks inside of the village. And because of that, if this conversation was had in the leaf, Code could potentially eavesdrop and figure out some intel about Boruto's plan. And this is exactly what he ends up telling Sarada. And he ends up giving Sarada these pendulums. And with these pendulums, Sarada ends up saying that if Code is to capture her, then she is to throw this away and Boruto is going to appear there in an instant. And the reason why he ends up giving this to Sarada is because he wants Sarada to let herself be captured so that they can find out where the Senju hideout is, and by doing so, they'd be able to confront Hidari, get his torn soul bulb, and bring it back to Sasuke. This is the plan, and although it is pretty dangerous that Sarada is going to be the decoy, they have to do so because they cannot throw away hope. They are this close in a way when it comes to dealing with all the Senju, but things still are pretty difficult. But no matter what, they will not throw away hope no matter what happens. And this is the end of the conversation with Sarada and Boruto. Now we end up going to Hidari. Hidari, who is perhaps reading something, it looks like. Jura is curious as to what Hidari is reading, but he isn't actually reading. He's just staring at pictures of cats. And we do know that Ikimoto's favorite things in the world are cats, as he has mentioned them multiple times through his statements in the volumes, and he has drew them multiple times in the volumes, so it's pretty interesting that Hidari likes cats. And Sasuke also did like cats, so that's also pretty interesting to see. Hidari ends up telling Jura is a bit confused as to why Hidari is watching this, but Hidari tells Jura that doesn't he find it kinda cute, and it basically reveals the reason why Hidari has been watching this. And if you pay attention to what it is actually called, it is called Kitty Cat Paradise, almost like the Make-Out Paradise thing that we had with Kakashi that Jiraiya ended up making, so I think it's a beautiful pun here. But then we finally see Amado leave his lab, and this is something that we rarely end up seeing, and every time we see it, it's always a problem. We have Amado who gives a scroll to Inogen and tells him that this is the information about the Momushi fight, all the data that is given. And he tells him no, don't give it to Boruto, but give it to his accomplice, Kashin Koji. And Inogen is a bit caught off guard. How does Amado know about him? And he tells Amado that he probably won't be able to hand it back to him immediately. But Amado replies like, yo, no, just give it to him. He's gonna know exactly what to do with it. And then he leaves. This is how smart Amado is. Doesn't talk too much, just gives you the information and you feel like you have to solve it yourself, and by solving it, you can make a mistake. And then Kashin Koji reveals something quite interesting. The fact that he hasn't had a prescience development for quite some time, so he doesn't really know what happens, as these are new developments. So he tells Inogen to bring it to him, but he's not going to open it until he ends up getting a new vision of the future to find out what it is. Which means that Kashin Koji at this moment is unprepared. So he ends up bringing the scroll back. And as soon as he gets a hold of it, he feels that something is wrong. He turns back, drops the scroll, and realizes that Kawaki is here. And Kawaki ends up doesn't even try and fight Kashin Koji, he just pulls out the toad, and as Amado says, and it is fully accurate to the situation that is here, it is the end of your road, Kashin Koji. And this truly is the truth, as Kashin Koji falls to the ground, as this was his shutdown code, as he has been shut down. Kawaki confirms this, and Amado tells him that if he wants to be transported to the lab, that he needs to touch the toad. And that's exactly what he does. The end of this chapter, and we see Kashin Koji on the ground. The ending preview, the ending note says, Amado conducts a screwed plan to kidnap Kashin Koji using Kawaki. What is his goal? And this is where the chapter ends off. This is one of the best set of chapters that we have gotten in a while, and I'm really intrigued to see what will potentially take place next. This chapter is an 8.5 to me, very close to a 9. There's really nothing I can say bad about this chapter. In terms of setup wise, it's just a 10 out of 10. I really love this. The writing when it comes to Kawaki, the big cliffhanger that we leave off to, and the fact that Kashin Koji hasn't planned this. As some people in the comment section said that, oh, Kashin Koji saw the future, but no, this is one of the weaknesses. The fact that there are times where Kashin Koji may not know the updates due to the fact that they are constantly changing the future. The future that he has seen doesn't match up with the new one because they have changed the future and averted the worst. Kashin Koji, due to the fact that Amado may have figured out Kashin Koji's ability, he may want it for his own. There's going to be so much to discuss before the next chapter comes out, so let me know your thoughts, comments, and concerns in the comment section below. Any theories, any explanations, or any videos you want me to make in the future, let me know. It's been your boy Dynasty, this was an amazing chapter, and I'm out, bruh.